Hello there! In this video, I'm going to slowly guide you through this entire unit. It's actually a re-upload of a live stream that I made in the run-up to the 2025 exams. But you can follow along with me as I spend a few hours filling in this A3 poster. As it's a live stream, I respond to questions given to me by hundreds of real students as they prepare for their exams. I have 7 of these live streams that I've re-uploaded, and over the course of this year, I'm going to host the remaining live streams. And re-record the old ones so you've got a chance to take part. If you want to join me, then please subscribe so you get notified when I announce one of these live streams. It would also be great if you could subscribe because I just hit 94,000 subscribers. So pretty close to that 100k milestone. So if you're finding my stuff useful and want a free way to help out the channel, that would be amazing. Now, I don't do sponsorships for things like VPNs, but the other things I make are entirely focused on helping you get the best out of your A-level. And selling all these things helps me make the free content on YouTube. You can get this poster and posters for every unit, both completed and filled in as digital files and now as a revision book. You could also follow along with each of my main videos with worksheets. These are designed to give you an active role and make the information sticky. I also have an app for you to test yourself, and I let you use all the paper 1 for free without ads before you decide if it's worth unlocking papers 2 and 3. Altogether, it's thousands of pre-made quiz questions and flashcards. And I have over 17 hours of exam question walkthroughs, as well as lots of other resources over on Patreon. And starting now, I'm going to be doing an exam question focused live stream most weeks that are exclusive to my Patreon supporters. Thank you for listening to all of that. Let's get started. Okay, good. Okay, so there are lots of different caregiver-infant interactions. You probably learned a few, and if you wanted to write a full essay, maybe you're going to want some more. But you fundamentally do need to know reciprocity and interactional synchrony and the difference between them, because you can be asked directly. So somebody, please give me a definition of reciprocity. Reciprocity, and there's something in particular I'm looking for in this definition. Thank you, that random person who just gave me £1. That's really kind of you. I'm not needing you to do that through the YouTube lives, but that was nice of you to do. It's probably the first time it's ever happened. Okay. Yeah, so what I was looking for there is a lot of you picked up on there was the element of turn taking. So if that is turn taking, reciprocity, I would like the other one now, interactional synchrony. And what concept am I looking for here? What is distinguishing it from reciprocity? Okay. Yeah. Simultaneous or synchronized is what I'm after. So those, thank you for that. I like that. Okay. So here we go. This is the first bit of text revealed. So if you're writing on your whiteboard and you're copying along, you can start off now. We can start with just a basic definition of attachment. So attachment is the development of deep and lasting emotional bonds. So what are we doing there? We're seeking closeness and we're feeling more secure when we're close to the attachment figure. So we might want to start off with what a definition of what attachment is in general. And as this entire unit is about attachment, that's a good place to start. But as you picked up in the chat, we can be asked directly about reciprocity and interactional synchrony, and we need to get they do seem very similar, but the distinction that we can take is oh, thank you. I've not actually done this before, so thank you. So is the turn-taking element of interaction. So the caregiver and infant contribute by responding to signals and cues from each other, but yeah, it's turn-taking. Whereas interactional synchrony is an interaction between the infant and the caregiver where they act rhythmically. So we do also have some other elements to caregiver and infant interaction that we can't be asked about directly, but if we're going to put together an essay on this area, we're going to want to have a little bit more than just reciprocity and interactional synchrony. So let's go with imitation is when an infant is directly copying the caregiver's expression. So that could form an element of the ones that we've talked about before, but they didn't necessarily be imitation itself. The other way around, so this is a caregiver-infant interaction, so it can be the infant responding to the caregiver, but what the caregiver does for the infant is also important, and we were picking up on this again later on when we talk about Ainsworth. So this is sensitive responsiveness. So the adult caregiver is watching the infant, they're paying careful attention to its behavior, and they're interpreting that behavior in such a way as they can figure out the needs of the infant. And then they will respond. So there's an interaction there, the infant letting the caregiver know where it wants, and the caregiver given where it needs. Okay, that is a few interactions. I didn't put in caregiverese because I think we've got enough there, but you can put it in there if you want. We're now going to have a little look at some evaluations. So how about you guys give me a few things that you would like to talk about as evaluations? So bullet point them for me. So actually, so that is all in your favorite one. You might want to build that out into longer paragraphs, but what we're trying to do here is bubble down the key terminology and concepts into a small space. So we'll maybe want to unpack this. But yeah, fundamentally, if we're going to write a 6 marks, AO1, we've got enough there to pull it apart. So we've got Metzloff and Moore. Definitely, whenever I see a mark scheme, it's basically always Metzloff and Moore in there as evaluation. Great study as well, really good study, and one that we can definitely evaluate itself. And then we've got some Condon and Sanders there. Social sensitivity, certainly. Metzloff. Okay. Got some good stuff there. Let me go through a couple with you and Karen writing as we go along. Hopefully you've caught up. So Metzloff and Moore. So I've simply said experimenter displayed facial gestures. So give an indication, so just sticking out the tongue, opening mouth in shock. That's what was done to the infants. They were between 12 and 21 days old. So that's the setup. What did we find? Well, fundamentally, what we found is infants can, even at that early age, observe the caregiver, and they're physically able to imitate as well. So we're not going to go into details about exactly how it was. The fact that it was blind to the recordings of infants were blind to the experiment. We're not going to talk about the way that it was recorded and stuff, but just very, very fundamentally, what did they do? What did they find? What does this mean? That's the fundamental element of a piece of research evaluation. We can go into a positive point about Metzloff and Moore and Condon and Sandor as well, which is if we use these video recording in studies, we have high inter-rater reliability. So multiple people can look at the same video rather than multiple people just watching the same child and trying to make the judgment in the moment. And also what we can do is we can go beyond human vision with these recordings. We can slow down the tape so we can see micro sequences of behavior and interpret those. This would be an example of reciprocity because it's it's the researcher making a decision about what facial movement to make. Okay, so the main evaluative problem with all of these studies, and this will go across the A-level attachment unit, is we're using inferences here. We're using assumptions about what's going on in the minds of these infants because these infants aren't able to communicate. And we might be going one step beyond here. We'll be going one step beyond what's actually true. So inferences are used to make assumptions about infants' internal mental state because they can't communicate. These assumptions, guesses may not be accurate. And that's a fundamentally unscientific element. We know we would have come across that before as well in approaches, and then that would have took us through. It's difficult to say that it's simultaneous because the infants were randomly shown the facial expressions. So you'd have to see it and then do it. Interactional synchrony is more like a dance where people are kind of moving together. And I think it takes a little bit longer to try and get that kind of pattern of behavior and a bit more knowledge of each other. So yeah, you're gonna have to know your caregiver a little bit better to have interactional synchrony. So we've got the Condor and Standor one, Condor and Standor, videotaped adult and neonate interactions, and then focus on neonates' response to adult speech. And this is one. So we obviously have like two pieces of research in the mark schemes. Often got one on reciprocity, and we've got one on interactional synchrony, and this one comes up a lot. So in this case, because we've got a videotape of adults and their neonates that they've been with for some time, we are going to see this behavior between this coordination between the adults and the infants. Okay, let me see if we've got any questions. Okay. Let's go for thanks, Lucina. That's very kind of you. So what came on there? Neonate is a very young baby. Okay, yeah. So we also have social sensitivity. So we're talking about norms around caregiver-infant interactions. So whenever we're talking about a norm, there are going to be people who fall outside that norm. Maybe you're interacting with your infant and you don't seem to have that interactional synchrony. Are you a bad parent? Possibly not. Let's go with the point that you could feel criticized if that's the case. Okay, let's move on to something else. I'll let people, if you're watching at home and you haven't on the recording, then you might want to pause here and then move on. Okay. Let's go on to stages of attachment. Okay. Let's keep the chat focused on the content, everyone, please, because it's going to be viewed by quite a few people afterwards, after the fact, and they're going to want to read some conversations from you guys that are adding to it. So we're going to get on to stages of attachment. First thing I would like you to write down in the chat for me is, of course, what stage 1 is. Give me some details about stage 1 in attachment. Yeah, so we've got asocial. That's great. Tell me some things about asocial. Okay, excellent. We've got lots and lots and lots of good stuff there. A lot of people turn 0 to 6 weeks. We're talking about innate behaviors at this point. Anyone can comfort and they don't prefer any particular caregiver. Let's go to stage 2, everybody. Give me the details of stage 2. What's it called? And what's going on there as well. Yeah, so we've got indiscriminate, and then give me a few details, just a couple of details. When is it? And then what's happening at this point? Yeah, there's a lot of variations in ages. Don't worry too much about the exact ages in all of the different books. They're all slightly different. There's different reporting everywhere. You go in the right kind of zone, you'll be all right. Okay, we got some good stuff there. Okay, so we have got indiscriminate. I put 6 weeks to 7 months. That seems the most most commonly quoted. They smile more at people they see frequently, is what I'm going to talk about there. Stage 3. Let's go. Stage 3. What's it called? What the approximate dates, and then what is happening here to distinguish it? Yeah, we are for both. Oh no, Mayor, first one to go the right terminology. Yeah. Excellent. And a good definition there for Arief. So we're getting the strong attachment to the primary caregiver, and at this point we're getting separation anxiety as well, and we're even starting to get some stranger anxiety as well. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, chat, for that. We're going to do our final stage now. What is the final stage called? And feel free to give me a few descriptions as well. Excellent. Yes, I've called multiple. We got some details there. From Sheffer. Okay, very good. Let me reveal this on the board so people who are writing it out can start to copy it out or check what they've already started to write. But then the rest of us are going to move on into the evaluations. Now, let's stick the evaluations to what we'd expect to talk about, which will be Shaffer and Emerson's study. So first of all, just tell me everything you can about that. I'm not going to be able to fit it all on the poster, but I'll be able to summarize it as best I can, and then we can start to unpack it. What do you know about Shaffer and Emerson's study? Yep, Glaswegian mothers and infants, 60 of them. Diaries, interviews, and observation. I don't go to quite my level of detail, but that's good. Longitudinal study, great term there. Okay, we got some good stuff there. What I'd like now, because when I reveal this, I'm going to talk about Sheffer and Emerson's, but I'm also going to talk about the positives and negatives of it. So how about now you give me before I reveal what I've written down, a few positives. What was good about the structure of this study? So good things. So we've got practical application that work. High ecological validity is something that I like to go into on this, yeah. And we've got the term mundane realism, which I really like. I know not a lot of people use mundane realism. I'll explain it for you in a second. But it's good to see the contrast between those. Okay, now let's go for some negatives as well. I think we've actually had the negative that I wanted in there before I asked for it, but we've got that. There's some great examples here that I've not included, which is absolutely fine. But if you're watching the repeat, you might want to look at the chat because there's some good ones. But I am going to use what's come up here a few times, which is the following. Let's go into Schaefer and Emerson. So this poster is boiling it down to key terminology and just enough to start to unpack it. So we've got Schaefer and Emerson, got longitudinal observation, 60, working class. You could pick up on that. Glaswegian babies. I'm not picking up on the. Actually, I am going to pick up on the generalizable element, but also temporal validity element. So very, very, very short structure of what was set up. What was found, though, because there's a lot of found elements. So they did find separation anxiety between 25 and 32 weeks. And then we did find stranger anxiety 1 month later. So fundamentally, what we're trying to build in here is the fact that Sheffer and Emerson's study is a support of the stages that came before it. So yeah, and there's a lot of moving parts there. We could obviously talk about 87% of develop multiple attachments at the 18-month follow-up. But fundamentally, this is a support of the stages that come before it. We wanted to dig in then to the positives. I wanted to say we pull apart ecologically valid and mundane realism. So ecologically valid is the environment in which the study itself is done matching the experience this participant would have in day-to-day life? Well, of course it is, because it was done in their own homes, well set up. The task itself, this is the distinction. The environment and the task. The environment is ecological validity. The task is mundane realism. So yes, mundane. A stranger visiting a working class house in Glasgow, absolute normal situation. The mother nipping out for a moment to make a cup of tea, absolutely normal situation. So very well set up in the realism of this task. The issue, of course, we can come into and go, well, this was a very long time ago. It was 1964, if you wanted the exact date. But it was 1960s, and it was working class, and it was Glasgow. That's a very micro group of people that were then building out into a full support that all babies go through these 4 stages of attachment. So, maybe it's not necessarily the strongest piece of supporting research. Okay, so what we are doing here is looking at the stage of attachment, but keep in mind you could be asked directly about the multiple attachment stage. That's why I've just highlighted that a little bit. So make sure that if we're asked about multiple attachment, we can go back to the stage of attachment and say, well, there is evidence for multiple attachments as part of Schaeffer's stages. But multiple attachment, of course, also includes, because it is an element of not just attachment to the primary caregiver, which is usually the mother, but also the father. So we'll dip in here to the role of the father. Now, I think we have to be very careful about the term here, role. So not just talking about the fact that they are attached to the father, which a lot of people will go into, which is like, Shaffer and Emerson do support that they become attached. But what are they actually doing? What is the father actually providing to the child? What's their role? So can you put in the chat, please? I've got 2 very clear roles. Put 1 or 2 of them in there. Okay. Here we go. Let's reveal that in case you're writing it down alongside with me. So, role the father. At 18 months, so I've just brought a little bit more, because I've got a limited space on this poster, I'm kind of using it as best I can. I've actually brought in a little bit more Schaeffer and Emerson findings here, which you could use in an essay just about the stages. But I found at 18 months, 75% of infants showed separation anxiety, and that's from the father. Hopefully that's obvious, which suggests an attachment to the father. So, 3/4 are showing that they've got attachment. So showing that they have those multiple attachments. And the element that I would expect you mostly to use is the active play. So we have this caring, comforting style of the mothers, but you can imagine if that's all you're getting as a baby, you're going to be very cautious. The father's role, it seems, is to make the baby a little braver and a little bit more stimulated, and to take a few risks. The child will need to start learning to walk, and that is a risk. They will fall over frequently when trying to roll when trying to walk. Okay. The other element that we could talk about is if we see the mother not be able to take on the caregiver role, the father's interactional style will shift to that more interactional, to that more comforting style. So it kind of seems like fundamentally what you need is a comforting style. The father's more active play is kind of a nice addition. So in a family dynamic where the mother is gone, the father will switch to that comfort level, which is interesting to see. You can go on, the wise pleb has asked about social skills. You can go on then to talk about the element of social skills. So let's talk about that. Oh, no, actually, I didn't want to reveal that yet. I would like you to give me some evaluations, please. What evaluations do you know about the role of the father? You can bullet point these. You don't have to give me much details. Just give me some sense. Okay, we've got a lot of socially sensitive stuff. That's a really good one to talk about because obviously there's lots of family structures that don't necessarily fall into the traditional type. And again, this is something that comes up again and again throughout this entire unit. We'll come back to it. We've got Verissimo and we have Field. And not everyone uses the same evaluations here. I'll talk you through them. If you've got different ones, that's absolutely fine. But I think they are particularly useful to create an argument. And we can also bring some of this back as well later on in the unit. Excellent. Okay, let me go through what I've got. You've got a few extra ones there, which are useful. Okay. Let me reveal. So we have the two researchers. Field, what we're finding. Didn't go into too much detail here about the setup. Don't think I really need to in this case because we're just observing people, the infants and adults interacting with their infants. But what we do observe is fathers spend more time on game playing, less on holding. But then what we also see is through this observation, the people who are primary caregiver fathers in this group are more sensitively responsive, which is this term that's going to come up again and again, and we need to kind of include in our essays. So both of those elements, the fact that the importance of active play and the role of the father as primary caregiver come into play here. Now, the reason I talk about Verissimo here is we're going to talk about the consequences. If we have an active father role, what is this adding to this child's life? Now, keep in mind, at the end of this unit, we're going to talk about the influence of early attachment on later relationships. So we can use this evaluation twice. Verissimo observed, Verissimo found that a strong attachment to the father. So when they looked at this correlation, it was correlational, but the strong attachment to the father was the best predictor of an ability to make friends in school. So we're going to suggest from that this active play, this bravery, is leading to an important role in socialization. So we can either add that as an extra role, or we can link it to the idea of active play. But we're saying that it does have a purpose, this slightly different parenting style of the father. So yeah, keep this in mind. We're talking about roles. Of course, socially sensitive. We have issues here for single, like there's a lot of theories that we're going to come to and talk about the role of the father, to say that the role of the mother cannot be replaced by a father. So yeah, that's our issue. So we got the obviously gay parents, and we also have single families, which is just father led. Okay, let's see what we've got. Right, I'm sticking to the let's stick the chat to what we're going through. Obviously, we've got an element here as well. If we recognizing the important role of the father in recognizing the important role of the father in raising this infant, then what that leads to is a question about should we have additional parental leave for the fathers, which kind of makes sense. And also, there's an element of the effect on the gender pay gap as well. So maybe the gender pay gap, which the issue is, obviously women get longer for maternity leave than fathers do. That is an issue, because then obviously if mothers are going away having multiple children, then that has an impact on their careers. That's a gender issue. But if fathers got equal paternity pay, then maybe that would equalize the gender pay gap a little bit. Yeah. Right. We're moving now on. Ooh, that's actually not revealed. Just give me a second, guys. I need to hide this. I will actually be back in 1 second. There we go. Okay, we're back. We're now going to look at animal studies of attachment. So obviously we have two researchers that can be asked directly. So lay them out for me. What are these researchers' names? Yeah, we're going straight away. Kesey was already on it, talking about Lorenz and Harlow. So yeah, we can fit all this in a relatively small space. We're going to start off with a conversation about Lorenz. So maybe give me a little bit of information. Let's go with the procedure. What was the procedure of Lorenz? So you can put it on your whiteboard at home, or you can just put in the chat if you're live. Okay, we've got the term imprinting. That's definitely what we're going to want to see in this little essay. Okay, yeah, we've got a clutch of goose eggs. A random element of the splitting would be useful to talk about. Okay, that's a great, everybody. So what we'll also talk about as well is findings. So while you're typing that, I'll just go through some of the things that you've put through as the procedure. We've got the element of Lorenz made sure that the geese saw him first. Element of following him. I think a few people have mentioned it, where they were put into a box, but we'll leave that for the findings. But yeah, half would not hatch Ashley's biological mother. There's also the element there, which a couple of you have picked up on, the critical period, which was not 6 months, as one of you has put, but a little less than that. But the procedure element of that is we are hiding the hatchlings from any moving object and then varying the time in which it would see a moving object. That's the procedure element. And then the findings as well, what happened after that. Okay, let's see what we've got here. So Lorenz, straight away, we want to make sure that the concept of imprinting is in there. So that's what he was testing. Birds were forming a strong bond with and follow their mother shortly after hatching. So we see that just in nature, of course, and that's obviously been called imprinting. So he's trying to test the dynamics of this. What's going on? Is it, is it sight? Is it visual? Is it an instinctual thing? Is it a learned thing? So the procedure, grey-like goose eggs, randomly divided. Half hatched for Lorenz, half of the mother. That's the fundamental element of how it was set up. And then the element in which we're testing the critical period and varying the time till seeing a moving object. So what we found? Well, what he did in order to test whether they would they had imprinted, because you say no, they're just following around. He put all of the goslings into a box, turned it upside down, and then pulled it up. And then what would happen is the half that were hatched by the biological mother ran to the mother, and half that were hatched by Lorenz ran to him. A pretty good indication there of imprinting. What we found with that element in which we vary the amount of time between the goslings hatching and seeing a moving object is it limited out there of around 32 hours in which we the goslings, if they hadn't seen a moving object, then were no longer able to imprint at all. So obviously that's very, very problematic in nature, but unusual for them not to have seen their mother in 32 hours. Okay. So what does it suggest? Well, it suggests imprinting is a biological element. It's a fundamental feature of these goslings' behavior. Okay. Let's go into some evaluations of Lorenz. I know some of the evaluations of Lorenz will follow over to Harlow, but let's just try and stick, if we can, to evaluations of Lorenz. What's good? What's bad? Loving how many people are watching right now. 3 times as much as the last one. Okay, yeah. Practical applications is what we're going to go there. Okay. Let me reveal what I've got. I know that there's an element that I haven't picked up on yet, but I will do a bonus evaluation that'll go both ways. So generalization of animal behavior to humans is problematic. Humans and animals have very different biology, and I'm going to say culture as well. I know animals' culture is a bit difficult. Humans have culture, and animals don't. Obviously, that's going to be a fundamental evaluation of either of these studies. Are positive, as some of you picked up on, is the practical application, but the inspiration that Lorenz had on future human research. So we've got this kind of issue where we can't really apply it to humans because they are very different, but maybe we can learn something from it, which can be later. It can be tested later, and then we can come back and criticize Bowlby for this because it seems Bowlby was a little wrong in talking about humans having a purely critical period, as you might be thinking about from the work on Romanian orphans. So there we have a printable generalization, which we can use for Harlow or Lorenz, but particularly for Lorenz as a positive, the influence on Bowlby and the idea of he would say 6 to 30 month critical period. Okay. Let's go and talk about the other side of this, which of course is Harlow. Tell me about the procedure of Harlow, please, in the chat. And I'll try and condense it all as much as I possibly can. This live will be between 2 and 3 hours, I think. I might take a break at the 1.5 hour mark, though. Okay, we have a wire monkey and a cloth monkey. We've intentionally orphaned this infant. Okay. Got some evaluations already there, guys. Don't need that just yet. Okay, let's go for some findings as well. yeah, if people wondering why I go quiet for a second, I'm just letting people in the chat type out some of the information. You can either join the chat if you want, or if it's a little bit much for you, get a piece of paper, get a pen, and try and copy down what I'm saying as I read it out or as I reveal it on the screen. We're trying to get all of attachment down just to one sheet of A3. Yeah, it was terrible study. The original footage is really mean. Okay, let's reveal the setup and the findings of Harlow then. Harlow, as some of you mentioned, we are testing cupboard love. So yeah, ultimately found it wasn't the case. A lot of people put on that in the chat, but there was a test of cupboard love. You know, Harlow could have expected to have found the opposite answer. So babies love mothers because they feed them, and we're going to go into this cupboard love as an explanation of attachment in a moment. So what's our procedure? What's our setup? We separate a rhesus macaque monkey from their biological mother, and then we're placing them in a cage with two surrogate mothers. I know there's lots of variations, but this is the fundamental one. One of the surrogate mothers provided food, the wire mother, and one comfort, that's the cloth mother. And then what we're fundamentally doing for most of the time here is recording the amount of time spent on each mother. That's our setup. There is also the frightened element as well. That's part of the procedure, but I didn't have quite enough space for that. But I include that in my results. So the results fundamentally were the monkeys spent the most time with the cloth mother. So they preferred comfort rather than food. The other element, when they were frightened, they ran to the cloth mother for comfort. So they were obviously more attached to the cloth mother. So that's a summary of the fundamentals of Harlow. And the suggestion there is a biological need for comfort. And it goes against, of course, the cupboard love theory. But let's add that in our evaluations. Give me a few evaluations here, everyone, for the Harlow study. Okay, ethical implications, certainly. Now, keep in mind when we're doing the ethical information issues, it is horrific. It is a very horrible study. But you know, if we're talking about how the link between, say, animal behavior and human behavior, the fact that it wasn't ethical itself is not necessarily a problem with the validity of the theory. So you can sometimes get stuck often with evaluating studies on the basis of ethics when we just say it was bad. And some questions are very much shaped towards, like, is this a true theory or not? And unfortunately, the ethics doesn't necessarily have an implication on whether a study is true or not. It just means it was mean. So just be very careful reading questions and just saying, well, does ethics actually come into this with the way the question is asked? Fundamentally, getting high marks in psychology is often reading the question and shaping it to that, and sometimes ethical issues don't quite match. Yeah, there was an issue with the face of the two monkeys. I do not know why there were different heads on those monkeys. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Surely Holly should have realized that was a problem. Yeah, Kizzy understands that. Okay, let's reveal that for you then. You've done pretty well so far. So we do have ethics. We can include it. Some questions, just as I said, be careful about the question type. So Harlow caused harm to primate infants and this damage. I mean, one element we can come here as well, which I haven't really talked about, is terrible to traumatize monkeys. This was very problematic for psychology's reputation in general. It came up again with, obviously, Milgram and Zimbardo's research. if we've got a very unethical study, it's not just the effect that we have on the participants. Wider psychology can be damaged, links to funding and stuff like that. The influence of contact comfort on Bowlby's ideas, the importance of the monotropic relationship as well. We could say that different heads act as extraneous variable on that. It's not what I picked up on, but yeah. But then we can also talk here about practical applications. So both of these studies, if you follow the narrative and you talk about, well, actually, both of these studies have influenced the attachment researchers of Bowlby and Ainsworth, and their research has ultimately led to changes in childhood care. So you can follow the journey there of psychology to go, well, these were ultimately the things that were responsible. I am a current psychology teacher, not an ex-psychology teacher. I've been teaching for A-level psychology for 9 years now. Okay. So we are going to move on to explanations of attachment, learning theory. So we kind of hinted at this a little bit. So let's go. Right, we're going to go for the AO1 knowledge here. So give me some information about what you would include in an AO1 section for learning theory. It's quite a lot that we can cover here. There's two main elements I imagine some people will be picking up on. So just throw some stuff in the chat, and I'll pick up when people actually say things in there. Oh, thank you. So yeah, cupboard love theory is the other idea. So what's a cupboard love one? I don't know about classical opera conditioning. Bye. This is the same thing. The Dolan and Miller's cupboard love theory is the behaviorist argument about attachment. So we are going to be talking about cupboard love, but that is called cupboard love because of the food element, and we've got classical and operant conditioning, which is picked up by a bunch of people. First one there, I think, was Jessen. Oh no, Daisy. Well done, Daisy. So drive reduction theory is used there as well as good. Primary and secondary is something I do pick up on here very briefly, which is not everyone talks about, so that's okay. Right. So let's go classical conditioning then. So what are the links here, everybody? The links between what is the unconditioned stimulus, what is the unconditioned response, what is the neutral and conditioned stimulus? People ask me about psychopathology. I will be doing psychopathology tomorrow. This digital poster as well, by the way, is available on, will be available on Patreon tonight when I upload it. Okay, we've got them all down there. So we've got food as the unconditioned stimulus, we've got pleasure, the unconditioned response, and we've got the mother becoming associated with the pleasure of being fed. So from neutral to conditioned stimulus. Give me now, please, the element of operant conditioning. So this is another kind of two-process model here. How does operant conditioning impact the behavior of the child? Yeah, so suggestions, and they're nice and early. So we've got caregiving is negatively enforced when the baby stops crying, which is very manipulative of the baby to shape the behavior of their caregivers, but is the case. When crying stops, baby positive reinforces fed. Yeah. Baby cries, rewarded with food. Yeah. Okay, we have got all that. I'll dive into the secondary drive stuff myself without asking you about it because I reckon there's probably some people in the chat that don't really have as much knowledge of that. So let me reveal that. So we have got Dolan de Miller's Theory of Cupboard Love. We can say it's based on learning theory. The fundamental concept is babies become attached because they learn their caregivers provide food. And I've talked you through the classical conditioning element. And I also talked you through the operant conditioning as we had it there in the chat. I think the classical conditioning, I think you could draw out the diagram that you wanted of it. The operant conditioning is maybe a little more difficult to understand. So we got positive reinforcement. Remember, positive, it means an addition of a stimulus. So it doesn't mean good necessarily. It just means an addition of a stimulus, and reinforcement to make it more likely. So we've got an addition of a stimulus. The additional stimulus is the food. So it's going to make a behavior more likely. If the baby is crying when it's given food, it is more likely to cry for food. So I have no idea what you guys are asking about when it comes to flour there. Sorry. So attachment as a secondary drive. What does this mean? Well, it means that we aren't born with the drive for attachment. We are born with primary drives, so like hunger and sleep and thirst. We learn through experience that satisfying another drive will lead you to be able to satisfy a primary drive. It's like money is the best example of this. Lots of people want money. You were not born needing or wanting money. It's kind of an abstract concept that we all try and get, because we learn over time that money will allow us to satisfy a primary drive like hunger, or for shelter. So yeah, that's why we're talking about attachment as a secondary drive. It's something that is not necessarily like a natural thing to crave, but the infant learns that by being attached to its mother, it will then get fed, and it will then get changed, and it will then get drink as well. So hopefully those of you who hadn't heard of attachment being a secondary drive, that was hopefully quite helpful. All right. So now we are going to go into the evaluations. Let's start with positive evaluations. Let's talk about what is good about the learning theory explanation. Give me what you can. Okay, guys, I'm going to ask you to keep the chat on psychology. I have already banned about 3 people on the chat, so keep it tight. I want people watching this back reading about psychology. Okay, we got some good ones there. Face validity is one I'm going to go with. But we do also have, we're talking about positives as well here. Okay, that's okay. This is just a warning. Okay, we have face validity. It just makes sense that if babies cry, then they will and then they get fed for crying, that they will learn to cry more to get food. It does make logical sense, and it makes sense to a lot of parents. And when this very first came out, it was incredibly influential and led to a lot of parenting techniques that kind of problematic. Because it was about, well, if your baby's crying, just leave it, because otherwise it'll learn wrong habits, when actually that was probably not the best advice to take. So you can lead on to another evaluation there. We talk about the social sensitivity of psychology studies. This led to some abuses of infants to be left crying for long periods of time in this time period. Now, what we can take as another positive evaluation is this is behaviourist research. Behaviourist research is, the behaviourist principles is very well supported by a range of studies. not just Pavlov and Skinner, but we can talk about Pavlov and Skinner. So as a behaviorist principle, it can be solved. Now, of course, we could maybe add on to this that while controlled behaviorist research on babies is not ethical or possible, so maybe it was limited because most of our evidence for learning theory is based on animals and not humans. But let's at least give them that as a positive, because I know there's a lot of criticisms of learning theory, which you're going to give me now. Tell me what criticisms you guys have for me. So what about us says already in limitations count as Harlow? Oh, Flowers is someone in the chat. Okay. Okay, a lot of people talking about reductionists. Very good. A lot of people talking about deterministic. We'll talk about those separately. I think one of the things we have to nail, everyone, is the concepts of reductionism and determinism and how to use them properly, and more importantly, not to get them confused. I don't know if any of you have had this advice before. I probably wouldn't use a reductionist evaluation and a deterministic evaluation in the same essay. Chances of getting them mixed up is too high. Flower asking, what's reductionism? I will tell you that then. Okay, let's see what I've got. So a lot of you picking up on the fact that we have Harlow as a study. We've explained it as part of this poster, so we can bring it across and we can say, well, this is a good example of a rejection of cupboard love theory. So the assumption would have been in this situation that they would have learnt that the wire mother provides food, so that's where the attachment would have gone to, and it was completely the opposite. Kind of a knockout blow, really, for learning theory, I think. What we're saying. So people asking me about reductionism. We have explanations in psychology that sometimes can be quite simplistic. So let's say, for example, I would only really use the term reductionism as an evaluation if we're talking about behaviorism and biological psychology. They are the most reductionist explanations. So let's say if someone has, talk about schizophrenia, for example. If someone has schizophrenia, we would assume there'd be a lot of factors that went into the fact that they have and experience such a complex mental health condition. So they might have, experiences during childhood. They might have biological influences going on in there. There might be cultural reasons about how they experience the world and how they talk about how they experience the world, which some of you would be familiar with if you would talk about the problems with diagnosis. So that's a holistic, complex, multivariable explanation. If you're a biological psychologist, though, you might just go, oh, well, it's a gene. Do you have it or you don't? Very simplistic explanation to talk about a gene that maybe the gene codes for the level of a neurotransmitter. But you can see there it's a very simple explanation of you have it or you don't, compared to a more complex, multivariable explanation. And you could argue that, we could test a very simple explanation. It's very scientific to have a simple explanation because we can, measure lots of people's DNA and say who has schizophrenia, who doesn't. But maybe it's too simplistic. In this case, when we're talking about reductionism in the case of learning theory, think about the feelings and emotions and attachment and complexity of an infant and child, and the development of over weeks and months of this caring relationship between a mother and infant. All learning theory, all behaviorism says is our behaviors are a series of stimulus response mechanisms, learned associations. Like, that doesn't seem nice to say about what is a complex relationship between mother and infant. And we could potentially say that it's too simplistic. So yeah, I've tried not to go into too much detail here because I know that a lot of people are talking about want to talk about other things. But that's probably the simplest way I can talk about reductionism. And I would definitely focus any reductionism evaluation you want to use on environmental reductionism for behaviorism or biological reductionism. which will come in quite useful for schizophrenia and later for OCD. So determinism is the concept that our behaviors fundamentally have a cause, and that cause is outside our ability to choose. Now, that's problematic for most of humanity, because we like to feel that we're in control. We like to have this sense that what we decide to do is because we chose it. Now, psychology, scientific psychology, is effectively a process of going through human behaviors and giving explanations for them. Now, we give an explanation for them that isn't, oh, it was free will. We are making deterministic arguments. So those deterministic arguments could be biological, it could be environmental, it could be due to the unconscious, according to Freud. So yeah, reductionism is about the simplicity of the argument and say it's too simplistic. Determinism is about the conversation about whether we were in control of our behavior at all. Now, some of you might get confused between these things and say, well, reductionism is more deterministic. It's actually not really, if you think about it, than holism. What we're saying with holism is our behavior is still caused, but there are lots of different factors that all interact to cause the behavior. You are no more free in a holistic explanation, really, than you are in a reductionist explanation. It's not about control. It's not about making decisions. It's about how complex and how detailed and how valid the explanation might be. When it comes to reductionism and holism, when it comes to determinism and free will, it's all about the level of choice that you have. So that's the distinction. But I can see how I get confused, and there are relationships between those two concepts that we can kind of get a little bit lost in the weeds in. So I would pick one evaluation, and then you're talking about control and choice when it's determinism, and you can talk about complexity when you're talking about reductionism. So hopefully that was helpful. Reductionism is good as it's more scientific. You could say that, and that's due to testability. If you've got a holistic explanation, you want to explain a behavior with 20 different variables all interacting, there is no way to run an experiment for that. We're talking about case studies here. But when we're talking about reductionistic explanation, we've got one explanation. We can do an experiment where we just manipulate that one variable. That's why it's more scientific. Okay, hopefully everyone, that little bit of a deep dive was helpful. Okay. Let's move on now to, and we'll probably, we got 26, slide 26, and we've got 51 slides. Okay. We're going to do this section, and then we're going to take a 10-minute break. So we are now on to Bowlby's monotrophic theory. So let's go in with the A01, everyone. What's our A01? Give me some terminology for Bowlby and how we're going to pull them along. Is there going to be other live videos for paper one? I am planning, I'll keep in mind planning because, life. I am planning to do one tomorrow on psychopathology, and the poster for that is already done, so I'm all good. And one on Wednesday for memory, which I have not done the poster for yet. So, yeah, we'll see. Okay, we've got evolution explanation, we've got social releases, monotrophy, internal working model, the critical period, sensitive responsiveness, social releases, yes. 7 till 9, hopefully, Flower, but probably later than that. But yeah, I did if anyone's joined later on, I did a full timetable of my planned lives at the beginning of this video, so you may well scroll back and have a look at that at the end. As far as I'm aware, social releases, but yeah. Okay, we got some good stuff there, everyone. Thank you very much for the terminology. There's a lot of terminology in Bowlby, and actually, I feel I messed up a little bit this poster. I'm going to fix it before I send out the digital version, to be honest with you, which is I did talk about the critical period, but without using the terminology itself, which was a bit of a faux pas. I'll change that monotrophic attachment bit. But what we do want to say is this is an evolutionary explanation. So we've got a counterpoint between biology of the Bowlby's monotrophic theory and the learning theory explanation. So we're going to argue for Bowlby's monotrophic theory that babies have an innate drive, an instinctual drive to form an attachment with their mother. And they'll stay in. Just mention that. This live will be available for 24 hours, and then it will go in a playlist, which is only accessible to my patrons, in with the social influence one that I did last week. And then that's what I'll do. I'll keep it live until a new one is made. Babies have an innate instinctual drive to form a strong attachment to their mother, and that's our term monotrophy. And then they'll stay in close proximity. We're going to talk about this being a survival. When you're talking about evolution explanation, it's all fundamentally down to survival. It makes sense for the baby to form a strong attachment, and it makes sense for the mother to form a strong attachment as well. Babies that do not form a strong attachment don't look for security. They might be killed or eaten, whatever, by the wildlife or whatever. And the mother that does not form an attachment with their infant, they don't look after their kid, and then their kids die. So the fundamental thing about evolution is you have to get your child to reproducing age itself. It is fundamentally a survival issue here about attachment. Okay. We'll just have a little check more for you questions that I've had. I don't think I've had any more random questions. So then we have the concept of social releases. So crying, smiling, vocalizations. These are things that cause a instinctual response within the caregiver. I don't have a kid, and crying just goes through me like nails on a chalkboard. That's what I can imagine. That's pretty biological. It's a horrible sound. The concept that if we look at a monotrophic relationship, infants should use the mother as a safe base, and this should show stranger anxiety to unfamiliar adults. You can see how those are also elements of this evolutionary process. It makes sense for the babies to use the mother as a safe base, and it makes sense to show anxiety to unfamiliar adults. What happens if a caregiver doesn't respond to crying, smiling? You would assume, because this is an evolutionary process, evolution selects for certain behaviors. So it would make sense that some babies and mothers won't show these behaviors. But the argument is, over the course of human history, those babies died, and those mothers didn't pass on any children to pass on the not listening to crying behavior. So yeah, it's a behavior shaped through evolution. Okay, so yeah, I'll change this paragraph, this sentence just a little bit. What I'll do is I'll start with the concept of critical period, because you can be asked directly about it. So critical period, so attachment must form in the first 30 months-ish, and there's variations of this, but 30 months is a generally accepted term. Or we have negative social, intellectual, and emotional consequences. Now, we know that we're going to go on from this to Bowlby's conversation about deprivation. We can bring some of the ideas in there, but, there's a lot to talk about in the AO1 for Bowlby's monotrophic theory. It's only going to be an essay of 6 marks at the most, so AO1. So there's a lot to talk about. But we also need to talk about an internal working model. And I might just add on to this a little bit, although I do talk about the internal working model later on. So I'm trying not to talk about the same thing in detail twice on this poster. But we're going to argue that we develop an internal working model from our attachment. And you should know, as I'm sure you do, an internal working model is a template based on that very first attachment, that the set of schema that forms a template will then go on to influence all our later relationships. We'll talk about it with the continuity hypothesis a little later. If you go back to the beginning of this video, I will there's a little grid there where I've got my planned lives. So yeah, planned live tomorrow, and planned live the day after, and then not the night before, because I'm just doing Patreon Discord chats on that night. Okay, so we have now our AO1 pulled together for explanations of attachment. Bowlby's monotrophic theory. Let's go for a positive here. What can you give me as a positive? Yeah, inspiration is a good one. Yeah, we've got research as well. Research from Lorenz reinforces this. This is good. I won't be putting everything on this down, but there's good stuff in the chat. So if you are watching, not live, make sure you keep your eye on the chat as well. How can you access the poster templates? They are also on my Patreon, so people who support on Patreon get everything, pretty much. At the student level, they get everything but the PowerPoint slides. So yeah, all the posters for all of the units are on there. I don't know how many of the paper-free ones I'll go through, though. Okay, good stuff there for the positives. I've just gone in with practical applications. So the work by Bowlby has influenced these the real life experiences of infants. One good one we can talk about is in the 1950s. It was very weird. If you watch a show from the 1950s in America, mostly, you see these like rooms full of babies, and they're just babies in cots. And what they used to do is, as soon as the baby was born, they'd take it off the mother, and their mother needed to rest, and they'd take them off them for like 24 hours, and then just put them in a room with lots of other babies. Totally the opposite of what you'd want to do. So Bowlby's monotrophic theory, and the work of Harlow as well, has led to the fact that you will not separate a mother and infant unless it's an emergency in a hospital. You would have immediate skin-to-skin contact. Changes the whole situation of early infant care, which is exactly what we're trying to do in psychology, is actually make positive impacts. I've also put a little slash there, inspired Ainsworth. That can be an entirely different paragraph as well. Okay. Social services and legislation and regulation of child code, you can as well. Okay, let's go for the criticisms then. What problems can we point out with Bowlby? So bullet point this for me, and I'll go into loads of detail. Okay, we got lax temporal validity. We can go into some elements there. It's an old study. We've got sexist there. We've got alpha bias. We can wrap all that into one evaluation, I think. Okay, we've got some good things in the chat there. Still going on gender bias, social sensitive. Okay, one thing I would like to point out here, which I don't know if anyone's mentioned, sorry if I missed it in the chat, is if we have an essay on explanations of attachment, it's just one. So it's Bowlby's monotrophic theory or it's learning theory. What makes sense as an evaluation? If we just get an essay on one. See if anyone in the chat picks up on it. Yeah, J Patton, perfect. Use the other one. So we've got a ready-made evaluation for each explanation of attachment if we just have one essay, which is the alternate explanation. So yeah, right there. Well, the alternate, yeah. So the alternate explanation for Bowlby's monotrophic is learning theory. The alternate explanation for learning theory is Bowlby's monotrophic, and you can talk about the research evidence behind it to support the alternate explanation. Who is Bowlby? Bowlby is a researcher in attachment, possibly the most famous researcher in attachment. Okay. Yeah, I might just do that. Okay. Let's go with looking at what I've written. Okay, so one thing we could bring in is we can bring in our knowledge of Romanian orphans and the evidence there that actually there is some sort of recovery, even with not just deprivation, with privation. If you get appropriate care. Remember with Lorenz, it was 32 hours. We didn't see a moving object. That was game over. That was it. So if it didn't attach at that point, they wouldn't attach at all. So what we would say is sorry, just getting rid of people off the chat. Keep the chat tight to the context, guys, because it's distracting me from having to get rid of people. So what we'd say is the evidence for Romanian orphans means it is sensitive, not critical. We then would talk about, when we talked about determinism before, this concept of an internal working model. All of attachment, and this works for relationships if you're doing it as well, all of these are very, very emotional areas that we like to believe that we have control over in our lives. Now, if we're saying that we build an internal working model, and that fundamentally leads on to what we know as the continuity hypothesis, that our future relationships are based on this very, very early attachment. What our issue is we are going to have a problem with actually saying that we're in control of over our lives if we have this internal working model. So yeah, people like to feel like they're in control of their relationships. Other issue is, of course, as some people picked up, like fundamentally, this is a view from the 1940s. It's nearly 100 years old. We had a different perspective at that point about the role of women and men in society. So Bowlby's perspective is a bit of a reflection of the 1930s worldview, and obviously now we have a different relationship with this monotrophy relationship with the mother. Okay, so I feel we have covered that pretty well. We'll move on when we get back to Ainsworth's strange situation. Okay, so I've edited the breakout of this video. Just a quick reminder that if you've made it this far, to subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot, especially being so close to 100k. And if you want the digital version of this poster, please grab it on my website or the entire revision book on Amazon. Let's get back to revision. So we're going to carry on, everyone. We've made it halfway through. We've probably got like another hour and a half, maybe a little less than that. And we're going to work our way through Ainsworth's strange situation. I wonder how many of you have been here from the start. Maybe not everyone. So let's just do a quick recap of what we're doing here. We are creating an A3 sheet of paper that includes a condensation of the core elements of attachment. Psychology can be very, very overwhelming. We're just trying to get the key features down there so you can follow along with me. If you want the digital file that I'm using to show on the screen, that will be on Patreon, one of the many things that I'm putting on there. If you're wondering whether I'm doing more of these, I'm going to try, and this is my kind of provisional live stream timetable. I've done social influence already. Attachment is now. I'm planning to do psychopathology tomorrow, and when I say planning, I am going to do it because the poster is made. The memory poster isn't made, but I might try and get that done, and then hopefully that will be on the 14th. I won't be here the night on YouTube the night before paper one, but I will be on the Discord for those of you who are in my Patreon. If you need some help up until midnight that night. Patreon is a crowdfunding website in which supporters of creative people can give them money for like additional resources. So I have like 16, 17 hours of exam paper tutorials, all of last year's live streams. If you're enjoying this one, obviously this one is going for a poster. If you wanted like quizzes, all the recordings of last year's quizzes, about 27 hours worth, are on there. So just a little different than what I did this year. So yeah, paper 2, I'll try and do approaches the day after paper 1, give you a bit of a break that night. The Patreon is a $5 a month, but obviously you'll only be on it for a month because it's nearly, we're nearly at the end of the year. So yeah, then we're going to do biopsychology. I'm going to give it another break after approaches. Go biopsychology the 19th. Research methods on the 20th, and then I'll jump on Patreon, Discord after that to midnight, and then you got your paper 2. Paper 3, I don't know, guys. I don't know. What I'll do, but we'll see how we go. Hey Mar, I turned adverts off this stream, so you've had no adverts. So this is me just giving myself a bit of a plug. I wouldn't want you to go through a 3-hour live stream without adverts, or with adverts. Not everyone has a YouTube Premium. All right. Let's do this, everyone. Let's carry on. We're going to go through the first section of Ainsworth's strange situation, and I'm not going to talk about the types just yet. I want you to tell me all of the different types that Ainsworth identified as indicating the strength of an attachment. Okay, we've got separation anxiety, stranger anxiety, safe-based behavior. Oh, thanks, brother. That's really kind of you. I'm glad. I hope they went well. Yeah, response upon reunion. We got there. Good. And we've talked about it before. Sensitive responsiveness is in the chat as well. So let's reveal that. If you're following at home and filling in a whiteboard or a piece of paper, or this poster itself, behaviors that indicate attachment strength, according to Ainsworth, are proximity to the mother, the exploration or safe-based behavior, you phrase it how you want, stranger anxiety, separation anxiety, reunion response, sensitive responsiveness. So these behaviors and the variations in these behaviors are used to categorize infant attachment into 3 types. So give me, first of all, what is also known as type A. So I imagine most of you did this in class and worked out your own type. Oh no, a lot of people go in type A is secure. Type A is not secure. Well, some people might not have learned type A, type B, type C, which is fair enough. Yeah, we've got insecure avoidant was the right one. Okay. Do you need to know which letter is which? One of these things, it's one of those things you can know that adds to an essay, but you don't need to know it. Okay. A lot of psychology is knowing what the specification is, knowing what the essay title is, and having things to say. The exact dynamics of exactly what you need to know can vary, depending on maybe what you learn in class. But you need to have enough knowledge in order to justify getting the marks. So sometimes when people say, do I need to know? It doesn't necessarily work like that. Okay, let's go. Some of you given you some elements there. What else is going on there? So we've got insecure avoidant. What is going on with those kids? How do we identify an insecure avoidant? Give me some features. Okay. So low stranger anxiety, low separation anxiety. What about the mother? What's the mother showing? Because there's two elements to this. I think a lot of times people focus on the behavior of the child, but don't think so much about the mother. Because this is a relationship between the two of them, and the concept is the mother's behavior is what's driving these types, according to Ainsworth. So yeah, we got some good stuff there. So exploring freely, not using the mother as a safe base. We got low stranger, low separation anxiety, and the mothers show low sensitive responsiveness. Okay, if that was type A, what is type B? Just in one word, what is it? Okay, yeah, there we go. Lots of you then realizing that it is secure. Okay, what element then is insecure? Sorry, is secure. What are we seeing with the baby's behavior with the mother? Joy on return. That's good. So we got moderate separation, moderate strange anxiety, good. Using the mother as a safe base. So we're reflecting. So this is why I started with the behaviors that indicate attachment, because we're reflecting back to these behaviors in the definitions. Okay, and finally, what is type C attachment? Okay, we got lots of people that are telling me that's integral resistant, which is completely correct. And now you're going to give me some elements of how we're going to identify an insecure resistant child. Yeah, even someone gave him the percentage then. Ambivalent is a great term. A couple of you use the term ambivalent. Some of you won't know what that term means. So we've got this kind of on and off again sensation of wanting closeness and not wanting closeness. Yeah, unfazed sometimes. Excellent. Okay, I can reveal this now. The typing of the 3 different types. We can check that we've got. I've read out the first 2 in full, but we've got insecure resistance. Infants can be clingy, and high stranger and separation anxiety. But we've got this element of mum comes back, and they have these kind of weird mixed emotions. They're simultaneously pushing her away and simultaneously grabbing onto her because it's they're very emotional. So this inconsistency about what the child wants is reflected in the inconsistency of the sensitive responsiveness of the mother. The child is never really sure what they're going to get from the mother. At least with the insecure avoidant, they kind of know what they're going to get, which is no attention. They're very confused, these infants. Okay. It's okay not to have learned sensory responsiveness in your class, and you can use it or not use it. It's up to you. There's lots of content that you can use to get an essay in here. But do keep in mind that the Angel Strain situation is an assessment of the relationship between the infant and the mother. So it's not just the baby that they're interested in. Okay, speaking of the strange situation, let's go into the dynamics of this. So I've tried to, obviously, of course, like condense this as much as I possibly can. So how can we talk about the procedure of the strange situation? The lowest tier of patron can get everything but the PowerPoints, because the lower tier is aimed at students, the higher ones at teachers. You get live streams on that, yeah. Okay, 8 different episodes, controlled setting, mother and baby in the room. So there's an element here of knowing there's 8 stages, you don't need to know every single stage in detail. You can go into more or less detail if you want, but it's 8. It's 8 stages. Yeah, each one lasts 3 minutes. But don't worry about memorizing it, because what we're talking about here is each of the stages is testing, all the stages together are testing these behaviors. Okay. Oh, actually, I didn't want to reveal strike findings just yet. Give me the findings, everyone. Give me the percentages. It would be good to remember the percentages for these, because it's going to be useful for this. It's also going to be useful for cultural variations in attachment. Okay, there we go, your percentages, definitely. So let me reveal that final element of the strange situation. So just to boil this down as much as we can, because we've already talked about the behaviors at the top. So we can talk about these stages, testing the behaviors. If we just want to talk about the strange situation on its own, we can bring that knowledge down to this section. So the procedure is a structured observation. There's 8 stages, with the mother leaving, returning, and exposure to a stranger, which tests those behaviors. Attachment behaviors recorded. So what have we got? Evidence. The finding was there was evidence for the types of attachment, with 66% secure, 34% insecure. And within that insecure, we got 22% type A, 12% type C. So that's our percentages. These are definitely percentages. So this matched the sensitive responsiveness of the mother. So as I said, we're looking at the behavior of the child and their attachment type, and we're also looking at the sensitive responsiveness of the mother, and we're seeing there's a correlation there. What are we seeing? We're seeing secure attachments are due to a sensitivity of the mother. What's the suggestion here? We can criticize that, but that's a suggestion. Let's go now into some evaluations. So now let's just focus on the positive, guys. Let's not talk about other units. Let's keep this tight on attachment, because I want people watching this back to be able to follow the chat as well. Jess, you can give me a really good one there. Based on American children, therefore ethnocentric. Okay, weird sample ethnocentric bias. Don't worry, I'm just anyone talking about Milgram, I'm just giving them a 24-hour timeout. Okay, let's go into. Oops, sorry, that's revealed it. The positives I've got. We've got the high level of control, so control with standardized procedures and behavioral categories. So the element we can pick up on this is the standardization that Ainsworth have, those 8 stages, and the careful selection of behaviors to be looked for, has allowed replication, and allowed replication all around the world. A good thing to talk about the level of control in a strange situation. Obviously, that has issues as well, but it is good to have the control. Another element, and we can talk about this again as much as you can throughout this entire A level. What you need to do is reducing the emotional mental load on you. If you can reuse evaluations, then you can. You think about, well, actually later on when you talk about the effect of childhood relationship on adult relationships, and it does seem to be a correlation between the types of attachment in childhood and the types of relationships we have in adulthood. So this is a term. This is predictive validity. We can test people's type as a child, and that will accurately predict the level of friendships and relationships that we'll have in adulthood. So you could talk even here in the evaluations about the correlation found in Hansen and Shaver's love quiz or the McCarthy study, which I'll come back to later on. But those are positives, of course. There are definitely criticisms. So again, throw in that those evaluations for me, critical evaluations. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need to. I'm just saying there's options here to find the connections between different sections. You wouldn't necessarily need to bring that in. Yep, type D is an evaluation that you can add in as an additional type that was added on. It's not something I go into, though. I don't think we need extra information. I think with Ainsworth, there's so much going on already. I didn't need extra stuff. Okay, we've got the concept of temperament. I really like that evaluation because we can talk about the contrast between a disposition and a learnt behavior. But the type D, yeah, if some people are using that, I'm not going to go into that, but that does work. Artificial situation. We can talk about Takahashi if we want, but we're going to save that for now in the because we can talk about that cultural variations. The man characteristics are in there. A few people asking about type D. I don't have time to go into that, but if someone wants to do a full type out of what type D is for Lily, that would be great. Collectivist cultures. Yeah, we can bring in cultural variations into the evaluations. That's certainly true. Okay. Very good. So what I'm going to do now is reveal the negatives, and I'll just talk through the ones that I've got. Probably the counterpoint to the control of the strange situation is the artificial nature of the situation. Like going into a lab, even though they make it, toys and everything, it is quite a strange environment for the mother and the child. So it's not like a family home like it was in the previous study. And also there is an element that the mother knows their behavior is being monitored. So we are looking at the mother's response. If you know that you're being observed, you're probably going to be more sensitively responsive than if you don't know you're going to be observed. Now, I've got an element there I've put there, demand characteristics, because most people know what demand characteristics are. But actually, it's not really demand characteristics because they're not trying to figure out the aim and help Ainsworth find out the aim. It's something else. Does anyone know what it is? Thank you, Avocado and Charlie, for that. Yeah, really, this is social desirability bias. They just want to look good in front of the researcher. They probably don't really know what the actual the aims are. They're not acting towards the aims. So I've kept. You can change that if you're writing that out to social desirability bias if you're comfortable with it. But if you're more comfortable with the concept of demand characteristics, you can just have that in instead. Okay, so Kagan's temperament hypothesis. I really like this idea. It kind of makes sense to me. It kind of explains Ainsworth's strange situation in a slightly less complex way, which is fundamentally infants are kind of born with a personality. They are different. They don't just come into the world all the same. They have a personality, and to go into some more detail, it's about a reactive temperament. How reactive are they? And we have high reactivity babies are stressed. Now, if you have stressed babies, you're going to have stressed mothers. So it explains both behaviors. It explains the stressed nature of the babies when they are put in the strange situation. But also, if you've got a stressed out baby, you're probably going to behave around them, in a different way than if you have a low reactivity baby where you have a little distressed. So I would elaborate on the predictive validity if you want to use that. If you want to make it into a longer evaluation, is maybe talk about some of the idea of predictive validity is that we can take a data point and that is useful for us in predicting something else. Like your GCSE results highly predict your A-level results because the kids who do well at GCSE tend to do well on A-level. It's not perfect, but it does have good predictive validity. This idea of measuring the strange situation and measuring types has a good predictive validity in adult relationships as shown by the studies that we'll cover in the adult relationship stuff. So if you want to build it out, say, well, actually, it is likely valid because it shows something later on in this person's life accurately. Okay, cool. No problem. Happy to explain that. Okay. Yeah, Charlie's explanation of interstate reliability was great in the chat. Thank you very much for that, Charlie. Saved me having to go into it. Okay, and a lot of you talking about the culture bound element of it. You can bring in some of the Van Eijendorn stuff, some of the cultural variations. We can talk about, I know a lot of you did, about a weird sample. It was developed in America. So does it really apply to other cultures? And we'll go into a deep dive on that in the next section. So let's go. Cultural variations in attachment is our next section to move on to. If anyone wants to show any random questions just before we start, please do. I'm busy. I'm doing pretty good. 2 hours, 14 minutes into this. We'd have to explain what weird is. I mean, you do know it or you don't know it. Western educated, industrial, rich and democratic. It's the idea that our samples that we use in our psychology studies are not like most of the rest of the world. 100's a large sample, really. Yeah. Could it be a 16 marker? Oh, yes, definitely. I'm not saying it will be, but potentially. Okay, I don't get any more information there. Let's go into cultural variations and attachment then. Please just give me a bullet point which tells me what the procedure of cultural variations attachment is. Someone's ready to go on that one. Great. We're on slide 36 out of 52. No, 50. Okay, yeah, we're good. We're good with that. So very simply, a procedure, it's a meta-analysis. So make sure you use the concept of meta-analysis. It's a collection of studies. They didn't do original research themselves. We got 2,000 infants-ish in 32 countries across 8 countries, 32 studies across 8 countries. And a point is they're all using the strange situation procedure as accurate as they can. Okay, there we go with our procedure. Let's go into. Oh no. Let's go into the findings. And everyone, give me some general findings first, or the overall findings. Okay, we got some findings here that are individual. I want to know the kind of the general findings. So we got secure was the most common, which is important. Like, you know, we're trying to kind of get the idea about whether the strange situation and even Bowlby's monotrophic theory is valid, and the fact that we're finding that secure is the most common, despite the variations, is important. Okay, insecure resistant was actually the least common. Yeah, and Western are more avoidant. That's good. Okay, so we've also had, and I know that you've put this in here as I was asking for the general findings, we've also had some individual findings. So I'll just reveal them. Now, there's a lot of individual findings. Don't get too tied up and try to remember too many percentages here, because there's so many different findings for so many different places. I would focus on the percentages that you want to use to tell a story. And the story I feel like we could tell quite easily is the story about the cultural variations between resistant and individualistic cultures, and because we can talk about why that is. Van Eijendorn, 1988. So only studies before that point. This study is, getting on to 50 years old. Maybe we could pick up on that, which we probably will. So our findings are general: secure is the most common, resistant was the least, avoidant more common in indigenous Western countries, and resistant in collectivist. So we could talk about Germany having the most type A. So 35%, much higher than average. We can link that potentially to the parenting style of Germans, promoting more independent children. Japan had the most, 27% for type C. Primrose, you're welcome to pause me as well. You don't have to watch at the same rate as everybody else. You can pause. So what does this suggest? Now, that fact that there is a global preferred attachment style, so most, even in the ones that have different levels, most of them are at that kind of type B attachment style, which suggests that maybe there's a biological thing going across all cultures. There is some still variation, but it is the most common across every single culture. So that's our suggestion. Let's go for evaluations. Now I'll just let you guys give me positives or negatives. Just blast them out there as different points. I'm fairly sure Israel and Japan had like similar. But if you want to talk about Israel and the kibbutz, if you know about the kibbutz system in Israel, that's fine. In Japan, I could talk about this a little bit more if you wanted me to. They have a very, very close relationship with their infants. They don't really let them out of the sight in the first few years of looking after them. So potentially in a strange situation, it might have been the first time that child had ever been left alone or left with a stranger. So we had extreme emotional reaction. If you look at the original paper, a lot of the studies didn't get through all 8 stages. They had to close them early because of the amount of the extreme responses of the kids. So not every study analyzed was an exact replica because the Takahashi Japanese study, they couldn't get through most of it. Oh, thanks, Sage. That's really kind of you. Hope you're enjoying uni. Okay, how generalizable? Only 8 countries? Yeah, but there were a range of countries. And we got to applaud the effort because so many studies are just done in America. But yeah, most of them were. Okay, let's go with these evaluations. So we had temporal validity. So these are quite old studies, the Van Eijendorn studies, 1988. So they're all older than 1988. So some of them can be 10 years older than that. So there's a question in this. I want to find out actually if I've got a date for this. Simonelli paper was 2014, so only 10 years ago. So big difference in time there. So what Simonelli is finding is more avoidant Italian infants, and the argument there would be, well, the nature of the modern family life has changed since the original study. Maybe if we looked again across the world, because there's a cultural change across the world that women's rights are being improved, and that's helping to access the workforce, but it's also changing the relationship between infants and mothers across the world. Maybe if we redid Van Eijendorn, then we would find very different results, and maybe even secure wouldn't always be the highest. Okay. Q. Right. So there's an element we picked up on this that because of that 50% at the lowest, secure always the most common, it does seem to suggest that there is a biological basis to attachment, and that's Bowlby's fundamental principle, isn't it? That there is an instinctual drive to show a sensitive responsiveness. So yeah, a good support. You could even, now you see the links between these things. If you're talking about Bowlby's explanation, you could bring in, the fact that Van Eisenjaw's show insecure is the most common across the world as an evaluation. So issue, a lot of the studies, someone picked up on that, most of them were American, a lot of the studies were just one single study of one location. Like the Israeli study was done in a very rural location. So, obviously Israel has cities as well. So if it had been done in an urban situation, it might not be that much different than the Western ones. Let's go. Another one, a meta-analysis is a very strong type of study. Meta-analysis, only one poorly conducted study only has a small effect on results. So generally the overall pattern is very, very, very valid. And using the strange situation to assess modern Western cultures may be an example of ethnocentrism. So a few people are talking about ethnocentrism. So this is where let's go into this a little bit of a deeper dive, actually. Think about the language that's used. Secure and insecure. That's a value judgment. You're saying secure is good and insecure is bad. Now, that's all well and good if, it across the world we kind of equal levels, but insecure in Germany, so bad to have more avoidant children, well, that's a cultural way of bringing up kids. Is it really bad to have independent children? So yeah, the ethnocentrism is viewing your cultural norm as the standard by which all of the cultures should be judged, and that's basically what's happened here. And we see with the UK having the strongest secure, it's a little bit suspicious, isn't it, that the researcher's own cultural background is the one that seems the best and others are being judged against it. Okay, right. In the nature of trying to get through this, we have another 10 slides to go, everyone. I want to move on to Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation. I do just need to hide my slide a little bit, actually, because I've doubled up. How about now? Okay, am I back now? Test, test, test. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Emma. Right, yeah, I don't know why that muted then. I didn't click that button. Oh well. Let's do this. Okay. Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation. Gosh, I'm getting tired, aren't I? Let's go through the AO1. What are we going to put in as our content here, everyone? What key terminology are we using? Ooh, law of accumulated separation. That is not something I'm going to use, Freddie, but that does sound like a very cool term. And I kind of know what it is, but not something I use myself. But that's good. Yeah, lose the ability to attach at all, and that's something that you could pick up on the evaluations, isn't it? Okay, good. Critical period effectiveness psychopathy. Took me a little while to find that. Good. And yeah, the 44 study, we would probably use that in your evaluation to support the ideas behind maternal deprivation. It's important to not confuse separation and deprivation. It's also important not to confuse deprivation and privation as well. Consequences are irreversible, yeah, according to Bowlby. Maybe he's not right. Okay, we're good. Let's have a look at this. So, the idea that there are consequences of deprivation of the monotrophic attachment. He's arguing that if we have that deprivation, there's going to be consequences. He's going to say that there is a critical period. 30 months is generally where it is, but potentially up to 5 years. And we're right, they are negative and they are fundamentally irreversible. I would really want to come back on that concept of irreversibility in the evaluations. So we're going to pick up on 3 different elements of the consequences of this deprivation. One is social development. So they're held back socially, so they are delinquent, they have petty crimes, they do petty crimes, which leads to the thieves study. Their emotional development, and our term there, which a couple of you used, well done, was affectionless psychopathy. So we don't have caring behavior, we don't feel empathy, and we don't feel guilt. And then intellectual development, we're going to argue that these people have low cognitive ability compared to their peers. They're not going to develop as well. So we're picking up on the fact there's deprivation, the fact there's a critical period, and then hit those social, emotional, and intellectual arguments about what's happening due to this maternal deprivation. Yeah, that's a great use of X. That's a great definition. Okay, let's go for evaluations. We're just going to throw them all in there, positives and negatives. Give me as many of those as you can. What are we going to say is good or bad about Bowlby? Abby, I think we're probably going to be done in about half an hour, to be honest with you. Okay, the fact there's a sensitive period from research and a critical period, yes. The 44 Thieves evidence. Yes, and genie isn't something I tend to go into. Mother blaming, yeah, we can talk about issues with social sensitivity. Not something I'm going to go into here, but good. And we have some research evidence there that I'm not aware of, but that's good. Okay, obviously lots and lots of different elements here that you could use. Some of them case studies, some of them not. So I would expect, and most of you went straight in with the 44 Thieves study. Struggle to fit all this in. Small amount. What we got? 44 Thieves. Obviously, 44 Thieves compared to another a control group. What did we find? 14 of the child thieves had affectionate psychopathy, and 12 had maternal deprivation. I know there's more information that we could probably put in there for the knowledge of our study. But we can go into that element of, well, actually, we can't control whether they are, it wasn't a controlled experiment. What we got there is a correlation. Now, there could have been a third factor between the deprivation and the thievery, and that could have been that there's extreme poverty within those families. Or maybe they're part of a criminal family, which also would have affected maternal deprivation as well. Okay. Let's move into it's led to policy changes around child welfare, so maternity leave and hospital visiting time for the mothers. We also have an element of continuity hypothesis we'll talk about in the influence of early attachment. You can talk about it in the context of maternal deprivation if you want, but you don't necessarily need to. So alpha bias here, we're potentially exaggerating the importance of the mother as primary caregiver. So this is his theory of maternal deprivation, not paternal deprivation. Yeah, there's an element that we could talk about temporal validity here. Yeah. Okay, let's go from maternal deprivation to remaining orphan studies. Now, I kind of messed up on the poster here. I had to use another section of the poster on the digital file I'll hand out. I will, over the summer, rejig this poster a little bit to make it fit a little neater, but it should be fine. Clive, I think that's an interesting evaluation. The poster will be online on Patreon, as with all the posters that I make during the series. Let's go Romanian orphans. So let's talk about. Someone give me a definition of institutionalization, please. What is institutionalization? Because we're talking about the effects of institutionalization. What does it mean to be institutionalized? When you're institutionalized, I mean, you're not wrong. The process of being raised in institutions such as an orphanage, I think that's, yeah. I mean, as a larger question, it's not what I've written, but people are right. It is being cared for by a system, because you can be institutionalized in a prison, and so your behavior is shaped by the prison environment. You're there for a very, very long time. It's hard to break out of that cycle. And a mental health institution as well is a place where people are institutionalized. But in this case, we're talking about Romanian orphans. We're talking about the care system. So we're talking about the fact that behavior is shaped by the institution, and the element of shaping is the fact that the care homes can't provide the same level of physical and emotional care as the families. Someone give me now a definition of privation. What does privation mean? We've had deprivation. What is privation? Abby's definition was really good there for institutionalization. Yeah. So we have deprivation, where we lose out on a caregiver that we have. Maybe the care is very inconsistent. But yeah, privation is, as you said, the complete and utter lack of care. And that's obviously what happened to the Romanian orphans. So our research here, the Romanian orphan study that we'd want to focus on, is Rutter's study. So could people give me a summary of the setup of Rutter? So we talk about the procedure, what's going on with the procedure. As you do that, I'm just going to reveal some of this slide because I realize I can do that.
Mm.
Okay. There we go. You should see the slide again now. So kids set 4, 6, and 11, 15. Natural experiment, 165 Romanian orphans. Lots found in privation. We've got some good stuff there. Okay. So yeah, we've got a longitudinal study, 165 orphans, lack care, adopted into the UK, and then we got the groups here. Now we're looking at these as different variables in a natural experiment, aren't we? So those adopted under 6 months, those would have experienced some lack of care, but early. Between 6 months and 2 years, a longer period of a lack of care, and 2 years plus a very long period of a lack of care. So we are testing there this idea of a critical period with this natural experiment. We're following up on them, a few years. It's again kind of difficult with this because there's so many findings to pull together. Like, what is the core, like the findings that we want to pick up on? You might have some slightly different ones than me, but that's okay. Give me some findings, everyone. What have we found with some of these returns to these children? Okay, we're disinhibited attachment. Yeah, we've got some IQ levels there of 77. Okay, we got some good findings there. Let me reveal a little bit more of that. So, ones I've got down at the age 6 on that return, we've got disinhibited attachment. So, we need to know what that is and show what it is. It is being too friendly around strangers, but we're finding that mostly in the 2-year plus cohort. At age 11, 6 months plus children were delayed physically, emotionally, and intellectually. So the group that was 6 months earlier, they seem to be fine. They were adopted by 6 months. And then 2 years plus, their average IQ is 77, so very, very, very low. So it does seem to show that that there is a sensitive period, but it so it didn't seem to matter how poor the care was in those first 6 months. And then, of course, we've got quasi-autism. So what quasi-autism is, a lot of people are asking. So it's autistic tendencies, but they're not actually autistic. The autism isn't coming about because they have autism. It's coming about because of the developmental issues because of lack of care. And then we're going to go into some evaluations. So can we throw in some evaluations for Romanian orphan studies, please? Okay, allocation wasn't random. Yeah, the parents selected children they adopted. So maybe the friendlier ones got adopted earlier. Who knows? I like the lot of value in longitudinal studies. I'm not going to go into that, but it's good. Evidence of a sensitive period. Any research, everyone? Any research? Any other research support of these ideas? Leighton. Hodges and Tizard, yeah. I wouldn't use the sane and inside places one. Yeah, stopped at 15. Gulfarb as well as what I've got. Okay, very nice. I think we've had all the ones that I've got. Apart from, this ultimately led to policy changes. It led to policy changes to prioritize getting infants adopted as early as physically possible, because of the long-term effects that delayed adoption can have. So yes, sped up the process significantly. We've had not randomly assigned yet. It could have been the more personable infants that got adopted first. We've got research by Hodges and Tizard, which found if you had a child that was taken from their families, and then we followed that child up, if they returned to abusive families, they had worse outcomes than if those children were adopted into adoptive parents. So yeah, we can see there an element of we can have some recovery if we're given to parents that look after them. And then Goldfarb finds something earlier similar, which is you foster out very early, you get higher IQ and social skills than if we delay that fostering. And then, of course, the counter to Bowlby, which is it does suggest that there is a sensitive period, not a critical period, because of this element of with suitable care, we can have some recovered. Okay. Bye. The A3 compiled sheets are on my Patreon, as are all the other things I do. I'll put a link on the comments at the end of this video. Okay. We are on, everyone. We are on. Thank you for sticking with me. Of the 207 people now, I can't imagine how many of you have managed to last the full 2 hours, 42 minutes. But we are on our last section, and that is the influence of early attachment. Good work. It's £5 the Patreon. Okay, we are going with influence of early attachment. Again, I think do I want to break this down a little bit? No, you give me the A1, everyone. what things are we going to talk about in the AO1 of the influence of early attachment? I've only included about 3 things here. You might want a few more, but I think 3 is fine. Yeah, a lot of people from start good work. Yeah, definitely use Hands and Shaver as an evaluation here, but maybe we're not going to use that in the AO1. It's kind of up to you, Charlie. I've got a lot of revision videos, a lot of past paper videos that I think at this point are probably the most useful things, especially the research methods ones. Okay, a lot of people jumping into the Hands and Shaver stuff here. I'm going to save that to an evaluation because there's some things that we want to pick up, things that we've already spoken about. And you probably notice now that I've gone a little light on them in other areas because I've gone into more detail here. So fundamentally, if we're talking about the influence of early attachment, we're talking about the role of an internal working model. So we need across this unit to have a good definition of what an internal working model. This is a template of how relationships are meant to go. There are a series of schemas about whether people can be trusted or not in relationships. So that's our template. We have something that is linked but is not the same thing. So based on the idea that we have an internal working model, that means that throughout our lives we'll follow a certain pattern of relationships, and also that pattern can be passed on to future generations. So if you can imagine you have a little girl whose mother is shows inconsistent sensitive responsiveness, and then that little girl learns that she can't necessarily trust people to act consistently around her when it comes to love. That's then going to affect her relationships with her friends, her relationships with her romantic partners when she's an adult, and also will affect her relationship with her own children. So the continuity is passing within an individual's life and also passing between different generations. Okay. We can also bring in, from Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation, the consequences of deprivation, because we're talking about the influence of early attachment on adulthood. Well, these intellectual difficulties, these social difficulties, and these emotional difficulties that we have set in place through deprivation in early childhood will then lead on. We also have the element of, we're not written this in again, but we're talking about infant attachment, influence of early attachment. The early attachment of the father, the Verismo one, could be used here because we're saying that, well, it is highly predictive. A good relationship with the father will lead to good early socialization. So it's up to you. You can use it. You cannot use it. It's up to you. Okay. I would like you now to give me some negatives of the theories behind the influence of early attachment. Okay, we've got deterministic, overly deterministic. That would make sense. So we're talking about this internal working model, this continuity hypothesis, going across generations and or on a lifetime. It's not one I've used, but it's a very good one to use. Yeah, the Kagan temperament hypothesis I've brought in again because we're talking about here the experiences that people have had leading to adult relationships when actually it could be baked in biologically. People's personalities, they're born with it, and that gives them poor childhood relationships and it gives them poor adult relationships. So a counter perspective there. Okay, self-fulfilling prophecy is another good term to use there, and the research being correlational is the one I'm going to go with, which you guys have put in. So correlational is not possible in this area of psychology to establish a cause and effect between childhood and adult relationships. You could not run a controlled trial here about giving people good childhoods and bad childhoods. It's just ethically and practically just impossible. So all of our research in this area is fundamentally correlational, and there could be other factors going on. And then we have the counter temperament hypothesis. So rather than environmental explanation, it's got a biological one. So we got anxious babies going to anxious adults, and that affecting relationships for their entire life. We do have some research as well, and the ones that you've picked up, maybe you went straight in with the AO1 with this, and that's okay. But we have Hansen Shaver's love quiz. Now, there's a lot going on in this love quiz, so it's hard to kind of summarize it. But fundamentally, what have we done? We got people to take 2 quizzes, and we found a correlation between childhood attachment type and adult relationships. So we found that correlation, and we're also finding, very interestingly, across all of the quizzes that were done, the same proportions nationally as there were in pretty much the same proportions nationally as they are in the original study. So we've got 56% secure, 25% avoidant, 19% anxious. Very similar to see those as well. So there's the adult attachment percentages. And the last one, McCarthy, is maybe a little bit more niche than Hansen and Shaver, but Hansen is better than Hansen and Shaver because or Schaffer, because they just relied on recall. Like, what do you remember of your childhood relationship and what do you think of your adult relationship? McCarthy went one level deeper and followed up infants that were actually as children assessed in the strange situations. So a very clear assessment, and then followed them up as adults to look at their adult relationships, and also found a correlation between the kids who were secure in infancy having the most long-lasting secure adult relationships and friendships. So yeah, also for a smoke, but I didn't have space to squeeze it in here. If you're writing on the post and you did, you could. And so I hope that revision video was really useful for you. Just a reminder, I'm going to be doing some more of these over the course of the year, so do subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, you can get this digital version over on my website. I'll see you in the next one.